The elders tell us to start in the east, where the sun rises. So I'm going to start my story in the east. I was born on a very snowy, cold day in December, the year of Star Wars. I was born in a hospital just north of here called the Camsdale Hospital. Have you heard of this one? It's an Indian hospital. It's not open anymore. It's involved with a long and interesting history that not everybody knows about Canada. There's a lot of oppression that has happened to First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples of this country. And part of my story is mixed in all of that. We all carry the bundles of the 7 generations before us. I didn't know on that day that I was born that I was carrying a very large bundle already. I was born to 2 residential school parents and many generations of residential school survivors before that. Have you heard of something called epigenetics? Epigenetics is the passing of fear of life or death from a mother to its fetus. My father had left my mother at the time that she was carrying me. She had an interesting story that's not mine to share that made her way to Camsdale Hospital where I was born. Some of the bundle I carry is hers. Some of the bundle that I carry as well comes from my experiences too. But what gets me through the darkness? Where do I find the light? Well, let's talk a little bit more of these things. I'm what is called a 60 Scoop survivor. I wasn't raised by my birth family. I was put into the foster adoption system. I was adopted by a very inclusive German family, originally living in Calgary, Alberta. When I was very, very young, we moved north to Grand Prairie to a farm in a small community called Webster. We lived there until I was about grade 7, and then we moved across the county line to Woking. Woking was a town of about 67 people, the closest town to our farm. And from there I went and was bused by 2 buses, transferring in the middle of a school, in middle of a field to get off to high school. I graduated from Spirit River High School. What has gotten me through the darkness, though, is a construct of values that I've learned from the elders and knowledge keepers as I've been reconnecting with my culture. These are known as the 7 sacred teachings, and I'm going to share these with you today. The first of these is humility. Humility is about knowing your place in the universe, knowing your place in time, knowing that we are a one little spot in a speck of a larger continuum. I know my place. I'm here for a little bit of time, and I'm going to make the most of that time. Humility is one that I find a lot of people don't know how to journey with. I have taken a couple engineering degrees and walk in the profession of engineering. Humility isn't always one at the forefront, I find, even though we work in the public interest. Humility is putting others before yourselves. I talk to a lot of people about truth and reconciliation. People are sometimes in the fear zone, in denial that Canada has an oppressive history. Some people live in the learning zone, where they know there's something that has gone on with First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people, but they're not sure how to help. And then there's people in the growth zone who are active in allyship, in sponsorship, being friends to Indigenous peoples and communities, and actively working for reconciliation. How do you get from the learning zone to the growth zone? I find it's the humility teaching that gets us there, that we put others before ourselves. I know it's uncomfortable to move to the growth zone, where you have to be the voice when all the other voices are seeing something different. That's how it felt for me growing up, though. It felt for me growing up that I was always someone different. I grew up in a predominantly white community, one of few First Nations people in the school that I was in. As a kid, you don't quite understand the systems that you grow up in. I didn't understand why other kids didn't play with me. I didn't understand why I was always chosen to be the brown girl in the ring when we sang that song in kindergarten. I didn't understand the strictness of the Catholic Church and what it said about conversion, that what I wanted to believe was not true and shouldn't be right. There are many things that took a long time to learn as I got older, to peel back layers of shame and blame and guilt, of fear, anger, disgust, sadness, that made me who I am today. Humility, though, drives me forward. I do the things that I do. I put up with the darkness that I walk through for my children. I've been blessed with 2 children who taught me what unconditional love is meant to feel like. I put them in my forefront of why I do things like these TED Talks, why I talk about my lived experience in the darkness. Why do I drive forward wanting to make impact in this country? I do it because I put others first. The next teaching is that of honesty. This one took me a long time to learn. Growing up again in a community where I didn't look like everybody else, I tried to be invisible. I tried to blend in. I tried to pretend I was something that I was not. When people asked my heritage, I said I was German because that is the family I grew up in. It was in denial of my true heritage. I remember as a child going home and wanting to rub the brown off my skin. I was in denial of who I was. As I moved through to the next phase of my life, I tried to blend in instead of trying to be invisible. I tried to be someone that just got along with everybody, didn't say too much, was very agreeable. Growing up and becoming an engineer was a hard profession to walk in as a female invisible minority. I remember eating my lunch in trailers plastered in pornography, having to drive drunken colleagues to the strippers, having jokes said around me that I didn't think were funny, and jokes directed at me that definitely were hurtful. But I had to hide it because this was how I survived. This wasn't a healthy way to survive, though. I needed to find a way to be honest with myself about who I was. And again, it took a very long time. What helped me along the way was the next teaching of respect. Respect is about respecting ourselves. It's respecting others. It's respecting each other in the beauty of our diversity, respecting us in our true authentic selves and where we come from. Respect teaches us how do we walk together. And it's in this teaching that I came to see that if I was true and authentic to myself, then I could earn the respect of others, but more importantly, earn the respect of myself. Courage was the next teaching. Courage is a tough one. It means countering fear. It means facing all the things before that. Facing and being honest with yourself about who you are. With things like imposter syndrome, it's very hard sometimes to find the courage to look yourself in the mirror. I remember it being well into my 20s before I could actually look myself in the mirror. I came away with a lot of body image issues. I came away with a lot of questionable beliefs I had about myself. One of them being that I didn't belong in the world like everyone else. Courage is one thing that can be practiced, though, and learned. This I learned very early on. I grew up with a mother very afraid of water. She passed this on to my brothers as well. But through practice, I'm now able to swim and dive beneath the surface. I grew up with a massive fear of spiders. That one's still kind of there. But I can go up to spiders about this big. Courage is something that can be practiced. The courage to be the voice of Indigenous peoples when their voice is not at the table. The courage to have an opinion different than those around you. The courage to be myself in rooms where I don't look like anybody else. I've faced a lot of darkness, and it's these 4 teachings that really got me through. When I think of my childhood, I think of thoughts of suicide, I think of thoughts of depression, I think of leaving home at the age of 17 with nothing in my pockets. I think of traveling to a town where I didn't know anybody. I think of the work and the hard work that I did in order to accomplish things like degrees with distinction, patents to my name, trying to run this race that was set by a definition of success that I didn't always agree with. Success was defined as having a healthy living, having a lot of rewards and accolades by what other people measured as useful or something to reward. It came to me that one day I was not feeling happy, and being an analytical person, I spent some time thinking about what happiness meant to me, and I changed my definition of success. I wanted to feel safe, because I haven't always felt safe. There are neighborhoods in this very city where when I walk through, I'm mistaken to be a hooker, where people have tried to pull me into their cars and into their houses. I think of my definition of success, of that of centered and balanced. The elders teach us the ways of the medicine wheel. Balance in physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual health. I think about what this means. It makes sense to me what physical balance is. Working out, going to the gym, thinking about what I put into my body for nutrition and healthy snacks. I can picture mental health, keeping my brain stimulated, keeping my thinking and my brain very active. Spiritual balance, I can figure that one out. It's not the Catholic faith that I grew up in, but rather coming to terms with what I believe is my purpose here. Why am I here? And what happens when I pass away? I struggled a very long time with emotional balance. Again, I grew up in a German family, very strict Catholic. Despite residential school parents and intergenerational trauma from my birth side, I also was the product of intergenerational trauma from my adopted side. My mom grew up in Germany post-war, World War. I know the things she did to us were only a fraction of what was done to her. Doesn't mean it didn't hurt, and it didn't have its long-term traumatic impacts on all of us children. When I think through balance, I think through how long it took to come to terms with showing emotion. What the elders say to us is that tears are something that we're born to have. Tears are something that I was taught to be ashamed of. I was punished for crying and locked away in my room. It took me a long time to figure out that emotional balance is living and feeling that emotion and letting it come to pass, not bottling it up. It took some very major slaps in the face by life to figure this out. Again, there's many incidents of darkness that I can talk about. I could tell you about the times that racist slurs are thrown at me, or the time that I was denied medical care in the hospital while having a miscarriage and nurses had to hide me away. I can talk about the resulting complex PTSD diagnoses that I've had, things I have to deal with from my childhood, things in my bundle that aren't all mine, that I still have to heal and find resolution towards. But part of that is finding and understanding emotional balance. It's through these teachings that I find my center. And it's through that the next teaching comes into play. This is wisdom. Wisdom is about lived experience. Wisdom is about walking in this life in a good way. Wisdom is living all of the other values together and learning to be centered. You can actually see my wisdom popping out if you look closely. With wisdom, of course, comes the next revelation, which is truth. Truth is an interesting one. Truth is seeing life and the world for what it is. The elders teach us many things. They teach us about the Cree teaching of Wakotoan, interconnectedness, kinship, that we're all tied together. We're part of larger systems than ourselves. We can connect on a spirit-to-spirit level, not only with ourselves, but all our relations. Grandfather Rock, Insect Kingdom, the universe, the planets. These are all spirits that we interact with, and we have a responsibility to steward to. We learn of teachings of the 7 generations, that we carry the bundles of the previous 7 generations, but we also must think of the future 7 generations in all of our decisions. We take only what we need, and we try to do our best by walking in a good way. When all of these come together, they all come together to reveal the last value, and that's of love. I spent a lot of time in reflection of love, having grown up pretty strict Catholic. Love is not what I was taught. Love is not one person to one person, singular gestures. Love is something I can feel for many people. Love is something that we can infinitely do. I can love my children, I can love my parents, I can love all of you. And we can have this positive energy spirit exchange. Love is what exists in between everything else and binds it all together. What the elders teach us is that we are love and that we are the medicine. And because of that, we are the light in the darkness. Thank you.